The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yaksan. I'm a core alignment coach, an emotional wisdom training specialist, and a diversity educator. I combine all those skills to design classes and training for people interested in learning how to identify patterns of bias that we've all internalized and ways to recognize them in order to develop new patterns and practice new patterns so that we don't act on the old ones so automatically. And we have new attitudes and behaviors that align much better with our values that are far more inclusive to people, to everyone, which makes life better for everyone in the world. If you're interested in looking at some of my classes or training for individuals, groups, organizations, you can find them at my website, knowwhatyouwantcoaching.wordpress.com. There's also a way to contact me if you want to discuss tailoring a design, a training for your group and your interests, whether you're an individual or an organization. I have a really special guest tonight, and one thing I would like to do is mentioned he's been on the show a couple times before, first as a chief of police emeritus who served as a police officer for over 30 years on 2 different university campuses. He's also a veteran, and now he's the president of Calvin Handy Public Safety Consultants. Calvin Handy, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. I know we're going to talk about a sadly timely topic of gun violence, prevention, safety, and you have such expertise. I really appreciate your being here.
Thank you. I'm very, very pleased to be here. Of course, with a very difficult topic and discussion area, but this is one of the ways that we can make some progress. Not me so much as an individual, but just this movement, this idea that we have to do something about gun violence.
And before I ask you your first question, I would very much like to thank you while you're on the air with me for your sponsorship of this programming. You have covered programming for this fall, which may not have been possible without your support. So I know that there's many others who are really grateful for the programming. So thank you so much for that.
Well, this is, I believe it's a groundbreaking way to use media. It's not totally original, but I think that the taking on diversity, inclusion, and equity issues, and then well beyond that, for the most part, and I'm not the most learned person on it, but I see that, a lot of people get together, a lot of people work together and communicate and do that a lot of times in person. But I think the growing use of this kind of media, I think was going to be a big boon for this arena, and I really think It's Your Voice is going to be in the vanguard as that slowly, but certainly will be happening. So it's my pleasure to be here and to contribute to something that I think makes a big contribution to us all. Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate that. So that's wonderful that we have your support, and thanks for helping spread the word.
Absolutely.
So I thought it might be nice. I mean, you have so much expertise. We're going to barely tap it today in our time, but I thought it'd be nice if you start by saying, why did you establish Calvin Handy Public Safety Consultants, and like the real basic, like what do you do when you say a school system or a client hires you? What is it that they're asking from you?
Well, that's a really good question to start with. And I hope I know the answer, but I think, in fact, I know that after during my career as a University of California, Berkeley and University of California, Davis peace officer up to the level of chief of police, when I was working in that way, I was also on a retainer to do, I had the university's permission to do some consulting work for a rather large criminal justice consulting business out of the city of Berkeley. And that's defunct now because the owner, Dr. Alan Kalmanoff, died last year. But after that work, we did some large projects and some small projects. Dr. Kalmanoff liked to focus on the situation in prisons and how we could bring some lessening of the stress and the whole process and the treatment and all of that to greater efficacy. And we also did a lot of work in cities around the country and establishing excellent community policing concepts, working on a number of protocols that were related to best practices, and where some police department or some agency or sheriff's department had gone off the wrong end of something, we come in and work with those folks to try to figure out what can happen better. So when I retired, I felt like I wanted to keep on some of that work, and I was particularly interested in the community policing piece. And as a big part of my feeling about public safety is that it's related to the ethical and the disciplinary, or I think the parts of the job that makes it safe for people in not in a responsive form, but make it safe as prevention. And so I have the opportunity to work with some schools and colleges and other folks around the state to just promulgate some of those ideas. And so, and you might notice that I was working on a website for my LLC, and then I realized that I would be getting way more work than I wanted to do. And so I've never really done that, because I can, I just go word of mouth, or I know a lot of people, or they know me. And so I'm available. In fact, I'm doing a project like that now. I'll maybe talk about it in a little bit. But so that's how it started. It started as me as an officer, and then up the scale of jobs that I did in the police department and ranks, and then working out as a retainer for this large Institute for Law and Policy Planning, Dr. Kalmanoff. And then after that, I just started to step out on my own, but I didn't want to create anything like he had. It was a rather large organization. So that's really the crux of it. And the added thing I would say is that I found a lot of pleasure in, as I found out, in serving the community, literally creating alliances, looking at the problems, trying to be, and I know this isn't really a word, but proactive instead of reactive on issues, and preventing crime. And there are ways that we do that. And so I thought I'd keep doing it for a while, but another year or so, and I think I'm going to see if I can actually really retire.
Well, good luck not getting more clients. And I do want to just share that I was trying to find, I know you're going to go broader than school shootings, but I wanted to share that I was Googling how many shootings there have been in 2022. And there were some various statistics, but I thought perhaps the most reliable one was by the Every Town research.
Yes, absolutely, I agree.
And they shared in 2022, there have been 141 incidents of gunfire on campuses.
Yes.
And tragically, 48 deaths and 115 injuries. And I feel like we need to, like, our society, we just need to grieve almost regularly now. These tragedies are far too frequent. And I know your emphasis is on prevention, so let me turn it back to you and see where you'd like to take this now.
Well, it's I mentioned at the onset that I'd like to look at things through this ethical window, through the issue of reason. And in our society for a very long time now, particularly in the legal realm, in litigation, as we're judging whether a crime happened or not, whether a person was not involved, and what did they do and what happened, what we are typically basing our observations and decisions and all of that on, we're basing it on what's reasonable. What basically the very kind of most minimal concept of and the law is like, well, what would the average person think about reason and reasonableness? And so that's what that gets applied. I mean, it's far more complicated than what I'm saying, but I think it's maybe a time for us to go back to reasoning and thinking about reasoning, because if we can, as a society, get, where we are we become adjusted or accepting of, well, not accepting. I think that's a little bit too far, but we kind of feel as though school shootings are something that just happens now. I mean, how unreasonable that actually is.
I really
for children, let alone the mass shooting arena that takes place in churches and sporting events and somebody's home, clearly in schools and workplaces and you name it. And as we've seen that grow, that pattern of use of force grow, use of gun violence grow. I mean, I don't know how anyone could see that as any aspect of that as being reasonable. It's just not reasonable. And so, in my case, I think I would be more inclined to look to our political construct, our politicians, in terms of that, and then I would look for people who are looking to invest in even the legal sale of firearms. I'm not necessarily talking about assault weapons here in California, but from what I've read and understand, it's a lucrative stock. And so, and I know we have there's just a Second Amendment piece that says, well, we have to have a well-formed militia and all of that. Well, we do. It's the National Guard. I don't think the founding fathers of the country they never could envision this kind of scenario, but had they been able to, I don't believe that from a point of view of reason that they would have said, that's one of the prices we have to pay for, for folks being able to, because of the Second Amendment, to have firearms. And in that scenario, there's nothing reasonable about that. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think it's kind of like some form of collective mild insanity. And I'm not talking about individuals who want to own guns and hunt and shoot and target. And I mean, that's all a very legitimate thing. But assault weapons, they, look at what they do. They do so much damage so quickly, and so many people can be involved. And they were not made for anything that we would normally do. They were made for a battlefield where two people are trying to kill each other as hard as they can. And so I don't want to be pontificating here, but I just don't find any of this to be reasonable.
No, I really want to underscore that. It's so impossible, in not only my mind and your mind and many minds, to justify ordinary citizens having semi-automatics. It just, as you said, they were made for battle. They were made for killing fast a lot of people for the battlefield, and it's just worse than mind-blowing. It's just heartbreaking that that is possible and so prolific and so allowed. I just had to reiterate what you just said, because it is just really hard to accept.
Well, if you come from my generation, right? I mean, now clearly people have been killing each other for all kinds of different reasons for a long time in this country and around the world. And I guess they're still doing that today. But I grew up in a community where this was in the 50s and 60s. So I don't know if you've even heard of that, but the 50s and 60s, in the Black community in which I lived in Shreveport, Louisiana, this old saying about it takes a village to raise a child, that was literally the truth for us. I mean, if we were in public, away from our parents or guardians, and we were engaged in something that we shouldn't be engaged in, those people addressed us on the spot. And then, so we got them addressing us. Then for sure, when you got home, your mom and your dad, whomever would do that. And so I think we missed that. But I think the bottom line is that it was unthinkable, unimaginable to imagine that someone would go into a schoolhouse and use a firearm on children. It was just, and it still is to me. It's Uvalde being among the most horrific experiences that any school could ever have. And of course, the response to what was going on and how it was brought to how it happened and went down. And I get upset, emotionally thinking about it. And so it's not reasonable. It's not ethical. It does not show. If you think about law enforcement, and the principles that we're supposed to evolve, well, they come from the citizenry. This job is actually, in essence, going back to 1829 and maybe a little before, but for that reason, folks in England who actually pioneered the first of the notion of community policing, where people want folks to have authority and power to make decisions and to do things, but they wanted to do that in the least injurious way. They wanted people to be intelligent. They wanted people to understand how to communicate, to socialize, and finally to have the allegiance to the people, not to the police chief, not to the sheriff, not to the mayor, not to the governor, not to the president, but to the people. And so that's what our job is now. There's a lot of argument about that and back and forth about what community policing is and isn't. But so I threw that in there because it's all about what's reasonable, and when you think about some of the rulings that you can see, for over the span of time, for example, like what's it called, Citizens United, where this court said that money is speech. That's a huge thing to do. But I don't want to digress that far. I just want to say that I believe that and I'd like to maybe talk about it a little bit, but that we have to like every town is doing, the Brady folks are doing, and on and on and on. We have to keep working on this, and I think one day we will find a plateau of what is reasonable, and I think people will take this into consideration, particularly our politician people, and make the changes that we know we need to make. We really do. And so I'd like to, unless you have a question, I'd like to tell you a little bit about this project that I'm doing right now here in Yolo County.
Please.
Can I do that? So on the subject of school safety, I got a letter from the Yolo County Superintendent of Education, Superintendent Garth Lewis. And Garth wanted to know, knowing that I was a kind of a retired consultant, he wanted to know if I would be willing to undertake and lead a team of people to build an emergency plan, emergency operations plan, an emergency training, and threat assessment processes, and a whole litany of issues. They wanted to know if I would be willing to spearhead something like that for Yolo County, for this one district in Yolo County, not the entire county. And Garth additionally wanted to, he said, as we pull these ideas together and pull this plan together, I'd like you to come up with a model that not only would be good for the Yolo County Office of Education, but any of the districts within the Yolo County school districts. I think there are about 5 of those programs. And then, of course, he threw in also at the end of the first meeting that unlike what consultants normally do, we come in and we help you with a plan, we develop it, we make sure you understand it, we stand back and help you implement it. But he also wished that we would implement it on behalf of the Yolo County Office of Education, which we said we would do. And we have been working on that for a few months now, really more formally since July of this year. And our goal is, or we're driven by, here in California, we have the benefit of legislation for comprehensive school safety planning. Passed in 2017, the law 32880 of the California Code of, I think in Code of Education and the Code of and the Penal Code. And so what this comprehensive school planning law, it says that every school through K-12 in California must have a plan for dealing with emergencies, threats, challenges, and the like. And I think it's really outstanding legislation. I think it's the kind of legislation that works. They go on. This planning goes on to describe what needs to be done, but it does not tell a particular entity what to do, how to get that plan done. So people like that because they're different districts have maybe different ways of seeing things, but we're all doing those 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever number there are of those issues that that we are supposed to do. And so with that as a guide, what we decided to do, and actually it was really it was the law. The law puts a great emphasis in every county and every school district on collaboration. And I think it's an underused word, but in this case for us, it's probably one of the most important aspects of what we need to do. And our first line of collaboration, and we've been doing this now since July, has been to look at the public safety community, to look at the first responders in Yolo County. And so when I talk about public safety and all of the folks who are involved in being first responders, we're talking about peace officers. We're talking about fighters and fire officers. We're talking about the district attorney's office. We're talking about the folks who are with us in terms of emergency communications. We're talking about folks who drive the ambulances that come to scene. And we're talking about the hospitals, both in Woodland and in Davis, local hospitals. We're talking about, and then of course beyond that is the larger community, which we have to address and be a part of this as well. And so I'm very pleased to say that in our initial reaching out to the first responders and the public safety people, the response in Yolo County has been just overwhelmingly, I would just say marvelous, because people want to be a part of it. They want to help make a difference. They want to make the children in all of our schools and all of our homes, and not only in schools but everywhere. They want to make people as safe as we can, and we think we can do it, and we are going to do it. And we're beginning to, what I really like about having a great university situated very closely to you is that that university has a great deal of the expertise that can help us as we kind of march forward and decide how we're going to do things. And so I just wanted to say that because I'm elated that that would be the case. And it probably helps that I know, having been a police chief here for 12 years, I know a number of the folks, and some of them are new, but I do know that this is the kind of process that will benefit our community, and we're going at it at light speed as much as we can, but at the same time we want to be very careful because we also have to train, a lot of the staff, a large portion of the staff in the Office of Education in the fundamentals of Incident Command System, the National Incident System, the Standardized Emergency Management System, not all at once, not all in one day. And we have to put all of these policies that the law and the state and federal law provide for us. And then, of course, the big part comes in. Regardless of how many of these policies you have and how well they work, you have to get out there and test drive them on an ongoing basis. You have to drill and train and drill and train until people have it down. It's not that people aren't able to intellectually understand policy. they are. But it's a whole different process when you have a drill that's, depending on the nature of it, anything from a potentially an active shooter to a hurricane or an earthquake or a flood or a riot or whatever it might be. How do we respond and keep our communities safe, and as much as we can, communities around us as well? And so I feel particularly honored in a way. I can't think of another word right now, to be able to be a part of this process. And I think that what we know for sure we have here in Yolo County is we have a large group of these first responders, public safety folks who are certified. They know the business. So we don't have to go around the world looking for people who can help us, who can guide us, who are the experts, who are the subject matter people who know this, really, really well. And so we want to take as much of an advantage as we can with them, keeping in mind that they have their real job to do, but this is a part of it as well. And so I'm just so pleased to say how well it's been and how well it's gone so far. And, so the other question that comes up is, well, what do you do to keep schools safe? Does anyone know what that is? And in the storytelling vein, I'll just say about a year ago, I was looking for some, like information on well, what do you do to make schools safe? Because I had one experience in 2015 with the Davis School District where I live, but I brought in a consultant team. I didn't do that work myself. And then I was looking for around, and so I found one where a superintendent of schools, and I won't name where this was, his response to keeping students safe was to have big buckets of rocks that would be alongside the teacher's desk, or maybe some of the students, that you could throw at a potentially active shooter. And so I think it serves. I mean, there's a bit of humor to it, but I mean, people are looking for, what do we do about this? That's the real issue.
Yeah.
So I think in California, and particularly with processes and programs by folks who are involved in this at every level and every town, they've come up with some ideas that we are looking at. And then maybe we're going to come up with some ideas that they're looking at. Because my personal goal, I look at the issue of gun violence in the schools and how that goes down, and it makes me think. I want to kind of eliminate the response piece of this, because in the incident command, we're looking at preparation, we're looking at response, and we're looking at recovery. Well, in the case of a situation like school shootings, I would try to find a way to, if we could, to keep a way to keep people from coming into the heart of a school and then acting out. And so that's a very difficult question. We're talking to people from a lot of different places about how would we do that in a safe, humane, kind way without, but at the same time be able to stop something. So that's just one of the ideas that we're working on. And it has a very good effect, because, as every town says, something like almost 90% of school shootings, the shooter tells somebody. And that's remarkable. And I think perhaps people say, well, I don't know if I believe that or whatever. But I think the number that they use was 90% of the time that these shooters are telling someone that they're going to do it. And if I can use an example of UC Davis, where I worked as a while, we had we still, I think, have their program based on crisis intervention and crisis response. And we had one segment of a team that were specifically responding to student issues, and most students at UC Davis are adults. And then we had another team with another structure of a team that dealt with adults, faculty, staff, and other people like that. And what my experience was in 12 years of working within that framework, that it was very effective. We were able to, because we organized ourselves around not only peace officers, but psychologists, folks who were had a legal background and legal understanding, folks who had student affairs in the case of students background, folks who had various trainings background on how we deploy, how we talk, how we coordinate. interdict a student that we have reason to believe is acting out. And one example I can give is we had a student who received an F in his physics class, and of course he was extremely distraught, and so he sat down and he wrote a letter that he shared with the professor. And within that letter, when the professor had enough presence of mind to say, I better let somebody know about this because this student seems like he's really distressed and may harm himself or someone else. So we had a chance to get the group together, because that group meets, I don't care if it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 4, whatever it is, we meet as need be. And so we looked at it. We devised a way to approach that student without violating any of his rights, of course. And we were able to do a really excellent intervention, I should say, that led to the student, being reunited with his family, receiving the psychological help that we needed. And also, when we asked him for permission, because he told us, he said, I do have guns in my apartment here in Davis. And we went to his apartment, and with his permission, and we found a number of rifles and handguns. And so that belong to the students. And so it's just one minor example. I'm not suggesting at all that kind of thing happens with regularity, because I don't believe that it does. But what I'm very proud of is the intervention process, the crisis intervention process, that's so well-rounded, well-founded, brimming with the respect for the rights of others, but also understanding the need that we have to keep our campus community safe. And then I can tell you about another situation we had at the UC Davis Medical Center. This was a number of years ago, and where an employee was terminated, and he said, "I'm going to come back here and do some bad things with you guys." And so we got our team together. We talked about what needed to be happened. The police were put on point in this particular situation. We found the individual's car on campus. We found him later, but we found his car. Got permission from the district attorney's office to enter it based upon his threats, and we found like a whole cache of different kinds of firearms and what have you. And it's because we are listening to what is happening out there, what is going on from people, and we're doing that in a multifaceted way in terms of what our response mechanism will be. And of course, our administration has to not to support and to ensure that we continue this kind of work. And so it's prevention. That's what we are looking at. We may find some technology or something that will help us do some other things, but by and large, we have to figure out ways to interdict and to prevent something from happening. That's the job of police departments to this very day. So it's just a couple of examples. I didn't want to belabor it all too much, but I will tell you that we're looking forward to working with all of our the folks on our advisory teams, the police chiefs and the fire chiefs and the communication chiefs and everyone who are giving the support that we need. And I think that we'll have a good outcome, because there are already some really extraordinarily good examples out there already, what some communities have done already. And so we're going to be looking at some of those, and looking at ourselves, and looking at our community, and ensure that we are reporting we have to report to the grand jury, to the board of supervisors, within the YCOE situation itself, Yolo County Office of Education, and the other districts, and then whoever else may be interested. And of course, last but certainly not least, the state of California. Each year, we have to submit a report. I believe it's in March, to the California Office of Education, describing what work we have been doing in the light of the comprehensive school safety program. And so we have to do that and explain it, and we so that way this won't just kind of fade into the woodwork and not just another thing that's on the shelf. The state is, and I believe the governor are very serious about this, as are all the school leaderships that I've had a chance to know and to talk with, as well as the families is an unstated, unnecessary to state that, where families are coming from. And so we want to do everything we can to make this a better situation. And then we hope, from a political point of view, that maybe like just huge tsunami of reason will show up here, and we will be able to kind of, I don't know if we'll ever stop people using violence against each other, not in the near future, but maybe we can curtail this to a point that's there's no violence that's acceptable, but we can do better than we're doing right now. And so we're committed to that idea. So I would.
Very impressive. It's really heartening to hear those examples of intervention, and it makes me want to ask you the question: is there information about that 90% statistic? The 90% of the time, shooters have told someone that they're going to do that. Is there information about who they tend to tell? Is it peers, parents, siblings, friends, and school staff?
Well, I tell you, that is a very good question. The only thing that I know is that they tend to be other students in the school, whether they're, depending on what level it is. But I believe that there are several sources out there where you can find this information. One that I'll speak to, let me find my notes here briefly, is you already mentioned it's the I'm losing my thought here.
Every town?
Every town is a very good place for that. They probably do enough research to get behind that statistic. Another place potentially would be the Southern Poverty Law Center. Those folks, they do a lot of research in this area because they're
excellent also.
To racism. But I think one of the better places that we might find some answers would be with Professor Garen Wintermuth. He is a professor with a huge resume in terms of what he does, and I won't try to relate all of that. But he has started a program at UC Davis back in 1991, and this program studies violence prevention. It is a program that now is in Sacramento. It is he has an office at the UC Davis Health Center. He now works with a team of, I think it's maybe up to 20 to 22 researchers, and they spend a lot of time researching and working on understanding from a research from a more like an academic point of view, but a real point of view, why these are happening. And it's called the California Firearm Violence Research Center. Dr. Garen Wintermuth. And I would say Dr. Wintermuth, who I have had when I was working at UC Davis, I had a few encounters, exchanges in terms of talking about what he does. And I haven't seen him in a while. But I do know that he continues through all of these years to take on this violence issue as something that he feels that we can find answers to, and we can make better than we are now. And he has actually been the cause of a lot of changes. Some of his work has led to gun manufacturers who were doing things that were illegal that needed to be addressed, and those things were happening. He also has been instrumental in just training and teaching people, and I'm understating his resume and his accomplishments. I want to be very clear about that. But you made me think about him. I had been thinking about him already. But he talks about 1991, and if you remember, that was the March 30th of 1991. That was the Columbine shooting. Remember, 12 students were killed. One teacher was killed, and I think the two assailants killed themselves as well. Well, that was with Dr. Wintermuth. That's when he said, this is something that I feel compelled to work on, to do something about. And it's taken all these years up until now, and for him to have built the structure that he's built, for him to have worked at a yeoman's level to understand the people. I don't mean just simple like, why do you have a gun and why did you shoot it? But the whole culture, the societal issues, the political issues. And I'll put it this way, as a matter of his impact, and it's not unusual for people in our day and age to get death threats. I think they happen to. If you had a death threat, you haven't, if you haven't had a, you're not in the, nothing as good is happening if you haven't had that. Well, Dr. Wintermuth has had death threats as well, and of course, I say this in a kind of a recently jovial way, but it's something very serious, and we take it very seriously. But he does not matter. He will be going on with what he wants to do, with what he's going to be working on, and he has more recently been talking about how his plan for passing this, what his product, because I think he's getting down the road a ways like me, and so he is looking forward to passing what he has created, this program. He's looking forward to passing that on. There's been a lot of monetary support for it. There have been a lot of I think violence, how bad ever bad it is now. I believe that it could be a lot worse, and so. And we are showing in the school safety issue, we are showing like increases in school shootings, but overall in the mass shooting arena, the numbers are still far too high, but they are not. There's been a bit of a downtrend, and you can find that in every town. You can find that in lots of places on the internet. I didn't want to make it too much of a focus on the statistics, as important as I know that they are. And I would just put out like a general statement to, and as I've already said, to our elected officials and our people who make a difference, is that it's time now. Our society, this is not who we're supposed to be. That we can just be okay somehow, or just we throw up our hands. We've gone to the moon. We've done all these wonderful things that we can do. I mean, if you've got the healthcare, this is not a bad time to be sick, because our medicine, the field of medicine, I think about the span of my life, what medicine can do, what technology has done, and you can go on and on. Media, fashion, any food, you name any area, but this area, for some reason, we can't do. That's not reasonable, and that's unreasonable. And so such a figure as, I don't know if you remember the former chief of Los Angeles Police Department. He left there under a cloud, kind of such a scenario related to the Watts riot after the O.J. Simpson trial. His name was Daryl Gates. And Daryl Gates in my opinion anyway, he was a very effective chief of that era, with the models that they worked from and all of that. But one thing that Chief Gates wanted was, he wanted that the folks that lived in his jurisdictions, which was basically the city of LA, and particularly his officers, he wanted the legislators to pass laws so that people couldn't get these high propensity firearms. And that's the police chief. And I can tell you, just on the policing side, which is my background, well, I'm talking about statistics now a little bit, but that gun violence is probably the number one a threat for being a police officer in today's world. It was the numbers of them that are dying as a one issue, but also that what we don't hear about are the numbers of peace officers who are injured and who are not going to recover in terms of being a peace officer again. They're going to live, but they're not going to recover and be available to do the work they need to do. And so I think it's about like the Brady's folks say, it's about legislation, litigation, and education. And but I'm glad to say that so many groups around the country, including the police chiefs and the sheriffs, who have been lobbying politicians for quite a while now, we need to make these kinds of changes. Now, I'm leaving always room for a little bit of the consequence of error, but I think that most peace officers, law enforcement people, they don't want to be running up against people with AR-15s or anything like that.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so I just feel as though if you get a guy like Daryl Gates, who was kind of a disciplinarian type police chief, and was a rock hard person, but he he knew what he was doing to a certain extent, and I was kind of elated to find that he was actually out there talking to the legislators about primarily protecting cops and then protecting people as well. So it is a I don't know. That's a I don't know how to explain it except that why would you give all these guns to
Yeah.
with mental illness? So
Yeah. That's
that
such a
is
great.
that if I can say this very briefly, I do like the newer focus that you see out there, both politically and socially, on mental illness and that relationship to gun violence, because I think that's going to be a major. I don't know where it's going. I'm not a psychologist of any kind, but I believe that is going to go a long way toward figuring out how do we solve these problems. So interdiction, mental health screening, a rapid response, good planning in terms of prevention are all a part of the steps that will begin to make a difference. In fact, I'd like to just go over maybe 3 or 4 of the what every town's doing, because they almost match completely what we're doing with the comprehensive school planning program here in California.
Great. We got a couple minutes left. It'd be great to go over that.
Well, first is to enact and enforce secure firearm storage laws. That goes without saying. Pass extreme risk laws, that too. But I think one that I feel that is building a culture in the schools, building a culture of safety, and working with teachers and working with students and working with families to reinforce that I think that the whole notion there. And I think the last piece would be that we really have to understand that that our ability to keep schools safe is directly related to the extent to which we collaborate, work together, and get our political folks to help make the changes that just need to be made. There are other ways to make money from the manufacturers and people who sell this. And I'm not talking about, I grew up in a family where my grandfather went hunting and shot guns, and I did that too. And I'm not talking about that level. We're talking about the dangerous level that where we are with the assault weapons. Thanks for having me.
Wow. Yeah, that is a totally different level. We're not talking about hunting and
no, of course not.
It's target shooting. That's a whole other ball game.
Exactly.
And I'm interesting. There's so many more questions. I know, but we only have a couple minutes, so I just want to. I appreciate some of the things you said, like everything from the you might think of it as sad attempt to create safety for school, the bucket with rock story. Yeah. That's very sad. Yeah, and also reflects the degree of fear there can be at schools by staff and students. And I love the way your approach is so multifaceted, looking at all kinds of variables. And yes, legislation would be so key. And it's interesting, here we are coming up to midterms, and so that all the concerns about gun safety seems to have, like, again, gone down to the bottom of the list when you look at some polls, which is really sad. Yeah. But thank you for not letting that go down to the bottom of your list. And it sounds like you guys are doing a phenomenal job, and your emphasis on collaboration and rebuilding culture and a culture of safety, because that would make a huge difference. And asking also, like, our politicians to collaborate. How about that?
Well,
how about that?
A lot of them are trying. I don't want to try to say that they're not. A lot of them are most definitely trying.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
I appreciate
really good questions.
Yeah, I mean, that was hugely educational, and I really appreciate it. And I want to recommend this for everyone to hear this. But since it's time to wrap up, I will just again thank you so much for your work. And Calvin Handy, Public Safety Consultant, boy, are you doing the work, and thank you for all the organizing collaboration. I also like to thank our sound engineer, DJ, and our producer, Dean Piper, and our viewers and listeners for tuning in. And be sure to tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time to It's Your Voice on Talk4TV and W4CY.com. And may we all have enriching conversations this week.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech